I feel like I'm on top of the world.
Hey, Jack, I feel like I'm flying.
You want to take it from the story, just so we all know where we are? All right.
You have probably watched Titanic more times than you can count. The sweeping music, the doomed romance, the ship splitting in half. It feels flawless every single time. But what if I told you that almost every frame of this movie is hiding something? Small slips, strange continuity jumps, and a few details that simply do not belong in 1912. Today we are diving deep into the blink-and-you-miss-it moments buried inside this legendary film. Some of these will make you laugh, some will make you rewind, and a couple might genuinely change the way you watch the ending forever. Stick around until the end, because the final blooper on this list is something almost nobody notices, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Let us start with something close to the heart of the entire story, the heart of the ocean necklace. Early in the film, when Rose first tries on the necklace in front of the mirror, watch the clasp and the way the gemstone sits against her collarbone. In that scene, the pendant hangs almost perfectly centered, catching the light from the cabin window. Now jump forward to the famous nude sketching scene. The necklace appears again, but this time it sits at a slightly different angle, and the chain looks like it has more slack than before. For a piece of jewelry that is supposed to be the single most important object in the entire film, you would expect the props department to keep it identical in every single shot. Instead, careful viewers have noticed the chain length subtly shifts between scenes, almost like there were multiple versions of the necklace being swapped depending on which actress double or lighting setup was being used that day. It is a tiny detail, but for an object this central to the plot, it is surprising that nobody caught it during editing. During the grand staircase scenes, where Jack first descends in his borrowed tuxedo, take a moment to look at the background staff lining the edges of the frame. In one wide shot, you can count a specific number of stewards standing near the base of the staircase. Cut to a slightly different angle just a few seconds later, and there is suddenly one more person standing in that same lineup, dressed identically, just slightly out of place compared to the previous frame. Because the scene was shot across multiple days with hundreds of background extras cycling in and out, it appears that continuity supervisors lost track of exactly who was standing where. It is the kind of mistake that only becomes obvious when you pause the film and count heads, but once you do, it is hard to ignore that the crowd seems to multiply and shrink depending on the camera angle. Here is one for the true detail hunters. During the daytime scenes on the first-class promenade deck, there is a row of wooden deck chairs lined up along the railing. In one shot, the chairs are spaced evenly apart, almost like a hotel pool deck. In the very next shot, taken from a slightly different angle just moments later in the story, those same chairs appear bunched closer together, with one chair missing entirely from the lineup. Deck chairs do not typically rearrange themselves on a moving ship, especially not in the span of a single conversation between two characters. This is almost certainly the result of the production using multiple replica deck sections built on different sound stages, and the art department not perfectly matching the chair placement between builds. It is subtle, but once you notice the chairs jumping around, it becomes one of those details that nags at you every time you re-watch the deck scenes. The band playing as the ship goes down is one of the most haunting elements of the entire film. But if you pay close attention to the number of musicians in different shots, something strange happens. In one wide shot of the band playing on the deck, you can count a certain number of musicians with their instruments. In a closer shot just afterward, there appears to be an extra violinist who was not visible in the wider shot, tucked into the formation in a spot that looks like it should have been empty. Given how chaotic and waterlogged this entire sequence was to film, with real water being pumped onto the set and actors performing in genuinely freezing conditions, it makes sense that exact character placement got a little jumbled between takes. Still, for a scene this iconic, the shifting size of the band is something that slipped through the cracks. Cal, Rose's wealthy fiancé, is often shown checking his pocket watch throughout the film, a small character detail meant to show his obsession with status and punctuality. In one scene early in the voyage, the watch face is visible for a brief moment, showing a specific time. Later that same day in the story, during a different scene, the watch appears again, and the time shown does not logically follow from the earlier scene given how much story time is supposed to have passed. Prop watches used in films are often set to whatever time looks good on camera rather than tracking actual story time, and it seems nobody on the props team was assigned to keep a continuity log of what time each watch prop should display. It is a small thing, but once you start paying attention to background clocks and watches in period films, you realize how often this kind of detail gets overlooked. As the ship begins evacuating, lifeboats are lowered one by one, each marked with a number painted on the side. If you pause during the lowering sequences and try to track which lifeboat number appears in which shot, you will notice that some numbers repeat in places where they should not, while others that should logically appear in sequence are skipped entirely. Given that the real Titanic carried a specific, well-documented number of lifeboats, each with its own number, this means the film is not always showing us boats in the order they would have actually been deployed. This was likely a practical filmmaking choice, since building and rigging multiple full-scale lifeboat replicas with working lowering mechanisms was already an enormous undertaking, and the production probably reused certain boat replicas for multiple numbered slots without repainting them between every single shot. Pay close attention to the deep red dress Rose wears during one of the dinner sequences. In wide shots, the fabric appears to have a slightly matte, heavier texture, moving in thick folds as she walks. In close-up shots of the same scene, the same dress appears to catch more light and looks like it might be a slightly different, shinier fabric. This is a classic case of a production needing multiple copies of an expensive costume, one for wide shots and stunt work, and a separate, more delicate version for close-ups where the actress needs more freedom of movement and a more flattering look on camera. While the color matches almost perfectly, the texture difference is noticeable if you know to look for it, especially during scenes with a lot of cutting between wide and close shots. During the famous iceberg spotting sequence, watch the shape of the iceberg itself across different shots. In the first wide shot from the lookout's perspective, the iceberg has a particular jagged silhouette on its left side. In a subsequent shot, supposedly just seconds later from a different angle, the silhouette of the same iceberg looks noticeably smoother and rounder on that same side. Icebergs do not reshape themselves in a matter of seconds, even with a ship bearing down on them. This is almost certainly because multiple physical iceberg models and digital iceberg renderings were used for different camera angles, and the visual effects team did not perfectly match the silhouette between the practical model and the computer-generated version used for other shots. In the radio room scenes, where the wireless operators are desperately sending out distress signals, watch the operator's headset across the sequence. In one shot, he is wearing a full headset with both earpieces in place. In the very next shot, only seconds later in the scene's timeline, one side of the headset appears to be resting on his shoulder instead of over his ear, even though no action in between would explain him adjusting it. This is a common type of continuity error in dialogue-heavy scenes, where an actor naturally adjusts a prop between takes, and the editor cuts between those takes without realizing the prop position has changed. For a scene this tense and important to the plot, the headset hopping back and forth is a small but noticeable break in the illusion. During one of the early first-class dinner scenes, there is a wide shot showing the table with everyone's wine and champagne glasses at a certain fill level. After a brief cutaway to a different character's reaction, the camera returns to the same wide shot, and several of the glasses on the table appear noticeably more full than they were before, despite nobody on screen pouring anything. This is one of the most common types of errors in any dialogue scene involving drinks, because between takes, crew members often top off glasses for continuity, but they do not always match the exact fill level from the previous take. It is such a normal part of filmmaking that audiences rarely notice it, but once you are looking for it, the magically refilling glasses become very obvious. During the nighttime scenes after the collision, as passengers begin to panic on deck, look closely at the deck surface in different wide shots. In some shots, there appears to be a light dusting of frost or snow-like texture on the railings and deck boards, while in other shots taken supposedly moments later in the same area, that frost texture is completely absent, with the deck looking clean and dry. Given that this film used a combination of real water, artificial snow machines, and digitally added atmospheric effects depending on the shot, it makes sense that not every camera setup received the same treatment from the special effects team. The result is a deck that seems to gain and lose its icy coating depending on which angle you are watching from. One of the ship's officers, seen multiple times directing passengers during the evacuation, is shown wearing his officer's cap throughout most of his scenes. However, in one specific shot during the chaos, he appears bareheaded, with no cap at all, even though the scenes immediately before and after this shot show him wearing it. Hats are notoriously easy for actors to lose during physically demanding scenes, especially ones involving running, falling, and being splashed with water. It is likely that during this particular take, his cap fell off during the chaos of filming, and rather than reshoot the entire sequence, the editors simply used the take anyway, betting that audiences would be too distracted by the overall chaos to notice one missing hat. During the ship's final plunge, as passengers slide and fall across the deck, watch the background action carefully during two separate wide shots that are supposed to represent different moments in the chaos. In both shots, you can spot what appears to be the same background performer, wearing the same distinctive coat, falling in almost the same direction at almost the same point in the frame. Because this sequence involved an enormous number of stunt performers repeating falls multiple times for different camera setups, it is highly likely that footage of the same fall was used in 2 different edited sequences, simply because it looked dramatic enough to reuse. For most viewers, this goes completely unnoticed, but if you are tracking specific background performers, the repeated fall becomes clear. There is a brief moment where a handwritten note or list is shown on screen in close-up. If you compare this close-up to another shot later in the film where a similar piece of paper appears, the handwriting style looks noticeably different, as if 2 different people wrote the props. This is an extremely common issue in films, since prop documents are often created by whoever is available on the art department at the time, and unless there is a dedicated person responsible for matching handwriting across every prop, different team members end up creating documents that are supposed to be from the same character but do not visually match. The Titanic's funnels are constantly producing smoke throughout the daytime sailing scenes. In one wide establishing shot, the smoke from all the funnels streams in a particular direction, consistent with the wind. In another wide shot, taken to represent roughly the same time period in the story, the smoke streams in the opposite direction. Wind direction can change, of course, but for it to reverse so dramatically between 2 shots meant to represent the same general time frame suggests that these wide shots were filmed on different days with different actual weather conditions, and the editing simply prioritized which shot looked most dramatic rather than which one matched the wind direction of the previous shot.